Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So you might be able to tell from the array I have in front of me that today's video is going to be all about fountain pens. So full disclosure, while I have a number of fountain pens, I would consider myself to be not very experienced in fountain pens. I do use bottled inks, but I don't know very much about like tinkering with my pens and all that kind of stuff. So if you are interested in stuff like that, definitely look on YouTube for different tutorials for like specific things. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is just my actual fountain pen and ink collections. You guys can see some of the things, the pens and inks that show up in my videos. I try and, let you guys know what I'm using and that kind of stuff. But here you can kind of see what actually I have in my collection. And yeah, so let's get started. So let's talk pens. You can see that I have kind of a variety of pens. So let's go ahead and group similar pens together. There we go. So when I first started out with bullet journaling, fountain pens came up pretty quickly, and as a pen lover, I think most of us have experimented or dabbled with fountain pens a little bit. So I was really interested in getting a fountain pen and trying it out, but I also wasn't sure if I would actually use it, and also being a lefty, I wasn't sure how the smudging situation would be, so I didn't want to actually drop a lot of money on a pen that I might end up never using. So what I ended up doing is I found fountain pens are really common in France. It's one of those things that I have students who are in like 6th grade and they write with fountain pens. Like it's one of those things that we have kind of lost touch with in the US, just for whatever reason, cultural, I don't know what. And here in France, they still have them. So you can go into a grocery store and they will literally have fountain pens for sale in the pen section of like the school section or whatever. So the first one that I ever got was one of these. This is actually a Waterman, and it is a fine point nib, which I actually really like. And this is just like a standard pen. I see a lot of my kids at school who have them. It's a Waterman, so it's a pretty decent brand, but it's not, one of the super fancy ones. But what I like is that it actually is a fine point nib. So this was the first pen that I got, and I really liked it. So I went back and I got this pen, which let's be honest, I bought it because it was mint green and I thought it was really cute. Unfortunately, as with a lot of pens that you find just sort of off the shelf, it has a medium nib, and this pen puts down so much ink. I have a really hard time using it because it bleeds through most types of paper because it just puts down so much ink, and especially if you use a vibrant ink, because I think the first ink I put in here when I got this was like a deep purple, which poor choice. Like it definitely was not a good choice. So I still am like holding on to this pen, but honestly I don't use this one very much. And again, it was one that I just picked it up from a paper shop and I got it for the look, not because I knew anything about how it was going to write or what have you. So after I had gotten these two, I actually got my first Pilot. So this is one that I actually bought in a local store, and it is, if I remember, a medium nib, which it's Pilot, so my medium nib on this one is actually kind of like my fine nib on this pen. So it actually writes pretty well. So these and my second Waterman, these were the first pens that I got. And when I first started out, I basically just used ink cartridges. We have pretty ready access to J. Herbin. So I got this orange and a black. And what I've done since then is I actually, just throw all of my various cartridges in here. However, a lot of times I will mark them with the color in washi tape just so I know what color ink is actually in there, just to kind of save space. So started out with cartridges, and after this point I figured out, fountain pens were something that I really did like to write with. I don't use them all the time in my bullet journal just because the ink does take longer to dry, and as a lefty I am much more likely to smudge it if I have ink that takes too long to dry, but I do use them for things like journaling and for writing letters to people and that kind of stuff. So my collection has grown over time. I think one of the next ones I got was probably this Lamy. So I actually bought this, and it came with a medium nib, but I have a pen shop in town where I can actually just buy the different nibs and switch them out. So this is currently an extra fine, and I will say, if anybody is considering Lamy, I love how they write, but the nibs are not always true to size. So this is one of the special edition like XL rose gold ones, and my store had it, but they didn't have any of the smaller nib sizes, so I actually have just the fine nib on this one. And I honestly feel like sometimes this fine nib writes more finely than this extra fine nib. Like, it's one of those things with Lamy that I've never had a bad nib per se, but I have had ones where they aren't like extra fine is not truly an extra fine kind of thing, but I do really like how these pens write, which is why I have 3 of them. For being honest, I really like how these write. I also had at one point gotten a Kaweco. So this one I actually got with a fine nib, and this is one that I heard kind of after I had gotten it that Kawecos can be a bit finicky, and I had that issue where this nib actually skipped a bunch and I had to finally like wash it out and clean it, but now it works a lot better. It's just that it's a fairly large fine. Like, as a fine nib, it doesn't write very small. So these were kind of my first ones. Like, basically Lamy I think is what we would consider kind of a name brand pen that I really got into, but part of it was because I had easy access to it and I was able to get the extra fine nibs for these pens, and so that worked out for me really well. So one of the reasons I've waited to do this video is because I bought this pen at the DC pen show when I was in the US this summer, and this is actually a fine Metropolitan and it writes beautifully. I love this thing. But I also ordered before I left a TWSBI Echo, which I have been dying to get my hands on a TWSBI, and they, like, my pen shop here that sells all different kinds of fountain pens has never heard of the company. So I could not find them here, and so I ordered it from Goulet Pens before I left to come back to France, and unfortunately it came the day after I left. So I wanted to wait to do this video after my parents brought the pen to me for when they came on their trip to visit. So now I can do with all of my fountain pens. I don't have plans at the moment to buy any more, so this is gonna be my current collection, I think, for a while. So these two are my newest ones. This is an extra fine TWSBI Echo, and this is a fine Metropolitan, and I am in love. These two write so nicely. So these are my fountain pens, but the fountain pens are really only fun if you have the ink. So I want to kind of show you the inks that I have and also show you how I decide to ink up my pens, because I know everyone has their own like method and logic for how they ink up their pens, and I definitely have mine. So I mentioned that I started out with a lot of ink cartridges, and I stuck with that for a while, but pretty soon was like, okay, you know, I want to be able to have different colors that I can't always find in cartridges, and so I want to get into bottled inks. Actually, before I go on, I have to show you. So, you know how whenever you buy a new pen, they give you a cartridge, and it's like always blue ink? Yeah, I have a collection because I don't use blue ink. I use black and like other colors. Maybe if it were a different color blue, maybe I would use it. But I just have this stockpile of the free cartridge that comes with the fountain pen, and I have no idea what to do with them. Like, I feel bad throwing them away, so I just like have been holding on to them, but they just like live in a box because I'm not gonna use them. Anyway, so these are my, cartridge inks, which you can see I'm getting kind of low. I used to have a bunch of different colors, but I've been slowly working my way over to almost completely using bottled ink. So one of the first things that I did before I actually bought any bottles is I got 2 different sample packs from Goulet Pens. So I've used a number of them, and so I actually only have, what, 9 different ones? Actually, no, that's a lie. I think I have another one. Wait a sec, here. So I actually have 10 different samples from the original 2 sample packs from Goulet Pens, and I think the sample packs come with 8, I want to say. So they come, I think it's like 2 centiliters or something like that. Basically, when it comes filled up, it fills up to like maybe here or so. And it's enough, if you don't have a really big cartridge in your pen, it's enough to fill it up usually like 2.5 times. If you have a really big cartridge, it's gonna be less. If you have a smaller cartridge, it's gonna be more, but like you can use, it's enough of a sample that you can really get a feel for if you like the ink or not. So when I got mine, I actually got 2 different sample packs, as I mentioned. So I got a gray sample pack because you guys know my obsession with all things black, white, gray, like, yeah, of course I got the gray sample pack. So I got that one, and I also got the shading inks sample pack. So things like Apache Sunset, there's a number of noodlers in there. There was a couple of, oh, what do I even have left? So let's see, noodlers, German Is that German? No, Ottoman Rose, not German Rose, Ottoman Rose. Caran d'Ache Infinite Gray, that was probably from the gray pack. So I've mixed these all in here at this point, so I don't even necessarily remember what goes with which. I actually got 2 Noodler's Lexington Gray because it was in the gray pack and it's also a shading ink, which is kind of cool. So these are the ones that I have left. And I had a couple that I loved so much that I actually bought a bottle of the ink after I had used up my sample. So let's see. First, I'm looking at my bottles off camera. So actually, the first bottle of ink that I ever got was this Burgundy from Mont Blanc, and I actually got this pen and this ink together. So I had a business trip to London, and they had a pen shop in the train station, and so I was like, I have to buy a fountain pen and ink in London, like, why not? And so this was just a really pretty, like, burgundy color of ink. I don't think I currently have it inked up, but I did have it in one of my pens for a while because it's just a really, really nice, like, rich red. And then I also got the pen there, which I have since changed out the nib to be a smaller one. So this was actually the first bottle of ink. But after that, I had a couple of inks that I tried from the sample packs that I really, really liked. And so I got bottles of them. So I think the first one that I got was this one. I'm sure you have seen this in some of my videos. It is the fuyu-syogun, oh, I forget what they call it. It's like smoky gray, or they've got like, the English name for it is kind of random. I never remember it because I just always remember it by the Japanese name. So it's really cool about this one is that my pen store actually had the option you could do like a full bottle or like a smaller. So I think it's the full bottle's like what, 30 or 40 milliliters, and this one is 15. So I like that, which most of my inks I have full bottles of, and this is one, like, it's one of my favorite ones, so I'm sure I'll end up buying it again, but I just like the idea of having a little bit less because honestly these ink bottles last forever, and at some point like space becomes an issue. So I just got the little guy. He's super cute, and I love, love, love this ink. I pretty much always have, you guys are gonna start seeing a pattern here, I pretty much always have my graphite Lamy inked up with this fuyu-syogun because it's gray and gray, like, yeah, that's just the way my brain works. So yeah, this is basically my pairing for this particular pen and ink. These almost always go together. Like, to be perfectly honest, I don't think I've ever had a different ink in this pen. So there's that one. The other one that I got that is from one of the sample packs that I'm obsessed with, and you guys probably know exactly which one I'm gonna say, is Apache Sunset. I love this ink. It is so pretty. I think the first person I ever saw using it on Instagram was Tiny Ray of Sunshine, and it is like sunshine in a bottle. I love this ink. It is so, so pretty. So I actually got this ink right around the time, and kind of because I also finally caved and got the rose gold Lamy. So you will notice kind of, I know it's not like an orange pen, but I don't know, I just thought like the sunshiny kind of thing went together. So this pen has only ever been inked up with Apache Sunset, and because I have the huge bottle, so this is a 3 ounce, I don't know what that is in milliliters, but this is like a full bottle of ink, so it is going to last me for a good long while. Then I've forgotten one of my fountain pens. Uh-oh, hold on. Let me go find it. Okay, I knew I had another one. So I actually, when I got the Kaweco, I actually did an order on Goulet pens. That was also when I got, whoops, these little syringes, which is what I use for any of my pens that don't have a piston. I use this to fill the ink cartridges in my pens. So when I did that order, I also got this, which is a Noodler's, I believe this is the Ahab, and it is a flex nib pen, which is awesome. So, and it is, there's technically ink in there, but it has like evaporated. This pen, I love this pen. I wanted to use it more, but I have just had several issues with it. So what's cool is that it's a flex nib, because then you can do kind of like brush style letter calligraphy, but you don't have to use a dip pen, which is great. However, it is a piston and it is not airtight. I feel like this pen, the ink evaporates so much faster than in any of my other pens, to the point that I have to be really careful, and I end up not having this inked up a lot of the time, and actually had inked up, I like washed out all of my pens and re-inked them up, and I have used this one a little bit, but like I think it's mostly evaporated at this point, so I'm gonna have to wash it out before I can actually use it again. And part of the problem is that it also uses so much ink. Like, this puts down so much ink. So the issue with that, one, is that you use up a lot of ink, right? So you need to have a fair amount of ink. Two, it can't be used on all types of paper because it is going to bleed through like crazy. So the only paper that I have found that it consistently doesn't bleed through on is Clairefontaine paper. So I actually have just like a normal like notebook like students would have for school that is Clairefontaine, and I actually have the French grid, which helps you with like your calligraphy and spacing, all that. And that is basically the only paper that I have that this won't bleed through. So it's a really cool pen, but it's also not a pen that I use a lot because it's just not practical in a lot of ways. But one of the things that I did after I bought this and after I realized how fast I was going to go through ink, especially like if I had a sample in here, it would use up the sample in like 3 days. Like it eats through a ton of ink. So what I actually did is I went out and I bought this Gray Cloud by J. Herbin. So it's one that I had here. It was like a super cheap ink, but it was a gray, which I really liked. And it's a nice like kind of periwinkle gray. It's actually a little bit reminiscent of this, the fuyu-syogun, but I really like it. So the thing is I got one that I wouldn't be upset if I used up a ton of the ink because of how much ink this pen puts down. So when I have this pen inked up, it's inked up with this particular ink. Unfortunately, this pen did not work out the way I had kind of hoped because yeah. So if you guys have any tips on the flex nib pens and I don't know, like I have issues where when I write, because it's a flex nib, it won't drop down ink in the center. And that's kind of the whole purpose of having a flex nib pen. Like I have to go back and fill it in. So if you guys have any tips or tricks, I imagine the issue is that I need to like tinker with it or something, and I'm just worried that I'm gonna break it. So if you have any tips, like please, please, please let me know, because I would love to use this pen more, but it's kind of problematic. Yeah. So next up, let's see, let's go ahead and do, so the Kaweco, because I had such issues with ink flow, it's now much better. I've actually kind of just used this pen as my random, like, it's almost like that random ballpoint pen that you just like have around whenever you need to write notes like really quick. I kind of use it like that. So this is one where I put in all different kinds of ink samples, and what I do is basically the ink sample that I currently have in this pen, I keep outside of this little plastic baggie so that I remember when I am refilling it what I actually have in there. And so this way I don't have it in one of my pens that I have other inks that I like to use more frequently, but it allows me to still test out the different ink samples and see if there's one that I fall in love with that I want to buy or what have you. So I currently have Diamine Marine in this one. I originally had bought this one and only had gray inks in it, but like I mentioned, I've kind of shifted my reason for using it, if you will. Then, so I actually keep these 3 pens as well as my black Lamy in this box. This is actually the tin from this black Pilot Metropolitan that I got at the pen show. These are my uninked pens because I have realized that I can't have too many inked, and because I've recently got new inks, I have more inked than I probably should for how much I use them, but this is where I keep the pens that I don't currently have inked. So the last 3 pens I have are either my new pens or one of my favorite pens, and these are all currently inked with new inks that I got in the past couple of months. So when I was in DC and at the DC pen show, I got these 2 particular inks. So I got, this is Montverdi Copper Noir, and I actually have this one inked up in my bronze Pilot Metropolitan, and you guys will have probably seen this in a lot of, you know, my videos, Plan With Me's. I used this and the Apache Sunset for my intro page for October and this one for November. So that is this Copper Noir ink, and I like that it's another little, you know, like 15 milliliter bottle so that I can use them up, because, you know, inks are great and all, but it's kind of, I don't want to have so many inks that I can never go through the bottle, so I'd rather have smaller bottles and buy new ones and test out new ones more frequently. So I like when I can get ones that are this size. So I currently have this one inked up. And the other one I got is Ernest Hemingway. So this is Organic Studio, and it's actually called Santiago Sea Blue, but like it's the Ernest Hemingway ink. And so you have this, like, it's this teal color, but it's hyper pigmented, and so it actually looks red in some light. So I'll do a test right with all of my inked up pens so you guys can kind of see them, but just, it's a really, really cool ink. And so I actually have the black Pilot Metropolitan that I got is currently inked up with Ernest Hemingway. Now, the only thing that I have to be really careful about is this Pilot unlike my other one, this one actually just came with a regular, like a standard international, well, it was an international short cartridge. This one actually comes with whatever these are called, where you basically, you pinch on the metal here and you stick the nib in the ink and you release it to fill. The problem is that this is super, super tiny. Like, I think this cartridge is smaller even than an international standard, or at least that's what it feels like to me. It feels like I go through ink super fast with this one. So I think I'm gonna do some research and figure out if there's a way to like safely disconnect this and put in something different or get a larger converter, or I don't know what, because it's just kind of impractical to have such a small cartridge, especially when it's an ink that I really, really love. So, but that is the one that is currently in here. Oops. And my last one, this is another one, whoops. So this is another one that I had to wait. So I ordered, my Goulet pens order was the TWSBI Echo, which is the pen I've been like really wanting to try, and a Noodler's ink that I heard about while I was at the DC Pen Show that I did not know existed. So this is Noodler's Beaver, and it is this gorgeous like red brown. I'm gonna, like, when I do the pen test, you guys are gonna see. It is absolutely gorgeous. And if you guys remember from previous videos, beavers are my favorite animal. It was like the first stuffed animal I ever got as a baby, and so everyone in my family, like everyone that I know, will, if they ever see anything that has like the picture of a beaver on it or a beaver stuffed animal, they will send me this. So obviously, as soon as I saw that this was an ink that existed, I had to buy it. Like, there's no way I couldn't have. And so that is the one that I have currently inked up in my TWSBI, which one of the things I really like about the TWSBI is that they're demonstrators. I don't have any demonstrator pens really. Like, you have the little like window in the Lamy, but it's not the same thing. And so I love that you can see the ink in here, and like, oh, it's so, so pretty. So those are all of the pens that I currently have inked up, and then, you know, you've seen all of my other pens. I do have a couple more inks, so I actually have this set of samples. A friend of mine on Instagram, Sun Lantern, she's actually the one I went to the DC Pen Show with, she has a ton of inks herself, and so she has saved all of her Goulet pen sample like canisters, and so she filled up a couple of inks that I was like really interested in trying. So once I have some of my pens, you know, once I use up some of the inks, I'm going to definitely test out these because there's some really, really pretty ones in here. Like, I'm super, super excited to try these out. So I do have a lot of different inks, but I basically only have 7 bottles of ink and then a bunch of different samples and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of trying to keep it from getting like too crazy, because like I mentioned before, I don't use fountain pens all the time in my bullet journal. I have, now that I've been doing more bullet journaling in my bullet journal, I do journal in fountain pen. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna see if I can create some room. So I think what I'm gonna do is, well, here, let me show you guys the fountain pens that I've used in here, and then I'll give you guys a pen test. So let's see. So for example, this is Apache Sunset that I used for my tasks in September. This one, as I mentioned before, this is the Copper Noir and Apache Sunset that I alternated doing the quotes. This was fuyu-syogun. I used this because my color scheme in October was black, white, and gray. I used my gray ink to do my journaling for that one. So you'll notice that when I decide how I ink up my pens, I like to have some sort of way that I'm going to remember what ink is in that pen. So for example, if the pen is gray, I put gray ink in it. If the pen is like kind of sunshiny, I put a sunshiny ink in it. Obviously it does not always work, but I do try and have some kind of like method just so that if I've inked it up and I haven't used it in a little while, I know what's in there. Oh, the other thing is that I tend not to, like, especially because I have bottles of ink now, I tend to use the same ink and the same pen because it just makes it easier. I don't have to worry so much about cleaning it. Like when I clean out the pen, but I don't have to worry about like really fully flushing it. I just have to do like an okay job at it because I'm not changing colors. I have the same color in there. I just need to make sure I don't have any clogs basically. So that is one of the other reasons why I tend to be pretty stable in what inks I put in which pens, if that makes sense. So next up is, oops, November. So this was Copper Noir that I used for this. But then what I did, this I'm actually alternating every day when I do my gratitude, and you can see up close, you can kind of see the difference, but you have to look closely. So for example, this top line here is actually Noodler's Beaver, and this line here is Copper Noir. And you can kind of tell because this is a medium nib, so it's a little bit of thick, like it's thicker writing. This one's an extra fine nib, so it's thinner, but also one of the things that I really liked, because I really wanted some kind of like coppery-ish ink, and then I heard about the Noodler's Beaver, so I was a little worried about having two different brown inks. But what I really like is that the Noodler's Beaver is like a red brown, whereas the Copper Noir is almost like a fall leaf, like bordering on like an orange yellow. So they're very similar, but they are not the same color. We'll just put it that way. So I also have, so this was the first week in November, I did all of my journaling with my TWSBI using Noodler's Beaver, and then this week I've been doing all of my journaling using my Pilot Metropolitan with Copper Noir. So that's because those were kind of my colors. Now that gives me an excuse to alternate every week and use both of those inks a lot more than I might otherwise. So let's see. I'm not sure where I'm gonna put Sunday, but we're just gonna do a quick little pen test because this is already gonna be a super long video and it probably shouldn't be, so sorry about that, guys. I'm gonna just take my normal everyday writer, do a quick little pen test. Okay, so just a quick little pen test to show you what the inks actually look like. I did not end up doing this one because I tested it on another piece of paper and there's just not enough ink in here for me to actually write with it. I need to clean that one out. So yeah, you can see that these two are very similar. It's also really interesting to see the difference between a medium and a fine with the Pilot Metropolitan, and the fact that this is a fine Coeco Sport and it looks just like the medium to me. And like this is fine versus an extra fine, and these two are fairly similar. So definitely some of the nib sizes that I have are not as consistent, I guess. But overall, the pens all write really well. I would say that probably, honestly, the Quaco is not my favorite to write with, and I think maybe it's just because I got kind of a dud. You know, it's writing a lot better now, but it was skipping for so much that I just kind of sort of fell out of favor with this one, or it fell out of favor with me rather. But all of these are the ones that I tend to keep inked up, and these are just all really, really lovely to write with. I really love writing with all of these pens. So the TWSBI, Pilot, and the Lamy, I really enjoy writing with these, and I also love these inks. So you can see this is like my random kind of, it sticks out. All the rest of these look kind of in a color scheme, and this is just my random, I'm testing out a new ink to see if I like it kind of thing. So that is my fountain pen and my ink collection, just to show you guys what all I have in my collection. Since I don't have all of my pens inked up with all of the inks that I have, it might be kind of hard to tell what I actually have in my collection, as well as showing you guys what I actually have currently inked up right now. And yeah, so if you guys have any comments or questions about fountain pens, let me know down in the comment section, and I will see you guys in my next video.
Hey guys,
bye.
So if you've made it all the way to the end of this video and are actually watching my end screen and you're not subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate it if you would. There's a little button right there for you to do it. And if you're interested in watching some more of my videos, I have links to 2 of my older videos off to the left there, so you can check those out if you would like to, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!